sometimes you take the hit. Yeah, people are just going to keep coming in.
Hello, fellow fatalists.
Fate, yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, so as I was saying, I usually don't have a presentation. We could go through the book and see what we want to say, but we started talking a little bit. Does anybody have any initial comments they want to make? I was saying, well, I had never read the novel before this, and
have you yet?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I wanted to read this when this came out. I put it on this schedule a couple weeks ago. Did read the graphic novel, and because I was talking to Heron, who mentioned the movie, yeah, and I have since just actually finished yesterday, watched the movie, and spent some hours today going through the original Kurt Vonnegut novel. So from what I'm able to tell, the graphic novel and the movie both seem to be very faithful adaptations of Vonnegut's original work.
The movie was one of the great ones, but I imagine it was a box office bomb at the time.
Yeah, I don't know.
Would have cost a lot of money and not appealed to the average audience.
Who was the star of that? That was
He was an unknown guy. No one's ever heard
oh,
of
really?
him
I thought it was
since
somebody.
then. Well, it was somebody, but nobody whose name is
Touché.
remembered.
Well, so
Michael Sachs.
Yeah, Michael Sachs.
Oh. Well, I read just that first half or so, like you suggested, and I just find it interesting because so far it's pretty heavy on, I don't know, like outside, like not really a framing device, I guess. I haven't read the end, so I don't know if it's on both ends, but just like saying, you know, oh, here's Kurt Vonnegut. This actually happened to Kurt Vonnegut. These are quotes that he made. This is what kind of inspired him to do this, that, or the other. I just find that kind of interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting techniques to talk about. If you've been here for this Friday night graphic novel group before, we've certainly talked about the various conventions that can be had and performed in the graphic novel art form. There certainly were a lot of here on show here. It certainly was a very good exploitation of the book. Heron and I were talking the other day about when you do an adaptation of a work into another medium, a novel into a movie or a graphic novel. And I think the adaptation has to stand on its own. It has to be its own creature. It can't be slavishly indebted to the novel or the original, whatever it might be, a play or whatever, because then there's no point. It has to do its own things because every art form is unique and performs differently. So, you know, a movie can't be a novel or a play or a graphic novel.
Well, I don't see
where it was.
The graphic, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't get, like I say, the movie I get, but I say the graphic novel as a unique original art form, I think is absolutely valid. But I don't see what the graphic novel brings to an adaptation of a novel, what it adds, or I just don't get it. It just seems inferior in every aspect. But like I say, a graphic novel as an original art form, that I think is perfectly valid, you know? Yeah. So like I say, I'm just against, I guess, graphic novels being adapted from some other medium.
Yeah.
It's just so limited.
Hey, dude, it's a format.
Yeah.
You know, we could have done a Donald Duck comic version of Slaughterhouse-Five, and could have had Uncle Scrooge as Adolf Hitler. Yeah, man. Yeah, we could have gone places with that one.
All right, settle down, Stu. Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be an aesthetic experience and a literary experience and an artistic experience on its own. And I would say in this case, it was. I got the feeling that, I enjoyed the time I spent reading it. I did read all of it. I couldn't help myself. And I think it stands on its own two legs. It's not, if you had not read the novel or seen the movie, which I hadn't, I subsequently have, then you get a good solid experience artistically and intellectually, and so I think on that level it succeeds.
I think that the people who adapted this did a really good job of thinking about what is unique about a graphic novel, what it can do uniquely to a novel or a movie or any other kind of thing. And I think one place that its strengths really, really shine in this format is, especially with this novel, there's almost a way in which it works so much better. Or this novel is a great one to adapt for graphic novels because the transitions when he's getting unstuck in time, where parts of the panels are bleeding into each other from one time zone to another, like it really kind of captures that. And just
Yeah.
like with a movie, you get a constant visual reminder of certain kinds of things. Like I kept seeing how skinny he was as a young man, like those super super skinny legs, like the two lines are almost touching, it seems like. And that just sort of brings home like his vulnerability a whole lot more, and all you have to do is kind of look at that and see that, and then it's just like a quick reminder. So I think like the visuals help, but then again, the people who did this did a great job of thinking about like, what can we bring to this, how can we bring our strengths, like, to make up for some of the weaknesses of a novel, because we're going to have our own set of weaknesses and we want to bring something new. Like you said, like, why do it? Didn't Hitchcock say that? Like, why do something again if you're not going to make it better? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think some of those lost unstuck in time transitions are a great example of that.
Sure. Yeah. I think there are a lot of examples through the novel that make use take advantage of the format. Certainly, like film, when you're watching the film on television, it turns into a storyboard, and the comic strips they happen throughout, and other playful experiments that he does with the transitions and everything. So.
See, this is me. I gotta take this out.
My goodness.
Yeah. So I think
Oh, I'm having dinner, but so what? What was that?
it bring.
Pardon? Oh,
Oh, and when he's reading Kilgore Trout's work, and it turns into like an old, authentic 1950s style comic from EC Comic. That's a good format. That's a good way of getting you into a different headspace and to presenting a new bit of information. And it's all done visually, which is great.
And being in that particular instance too, he throws in that format for the aliens, the whatever, the T aliens, and he throws that into those people, and he throws a little allusion to that in the visual comic, format, which even if that got said in the novel, it would easily get lost. Like you'd still be imagining it however you were already imagining it. So I thought that was an interesting layer that kind of made you think even more like, is he just crazy? Or
that is true. Yeah. In a novel, because it's in a visual medium like a movie or a comic or a television show, a visual medium, you tend to think, okay, if you're seeing it, it must be happening. You can do things like with unreliable narration in a novel, and think it's all happening in some character's imagination. But when it's a visual medium, it's kind of more difficult to question the reality of what you're seeing because it's right in front of your eyes. So that has to be taken into account. So
Yeah,
you
headspace is in a novel. There's a lot of stuff that's internal thought processes that
Yeah.
really you can't render. You know, they're streams of text.
yeah, yeah. And certainly Vonnegut's work certainly gives a great deal of intellectual meat here that we can chew over. We were talking earlier about the ideas of the, the fatalism, as Stephen was putting it. Yeah, there's a lot there to go through. Yeah, I did read all of it, so I might be spoiling some of it if we did actually go through it with you. But there's a lot to like about this. I think. Let me pump it up here. I certainly did. I certainly did like the approach. I mean, it's not so somber and mature and sophisticated. It's whimsical, it's playful, and I think that's appropriate. I think. I mean, I think Vonnegut himself certainly intended to be serious, but it is a satire. It is a satire. I mean, Vonnegut, himself, I'm sure, intended you to laugh and have fun with his comic, with his novel, because
Well,
clearly it's satirical.
I'd call it a tragedy.
Yeah,
And satirical, I'm not sure that was the main ambition of it.
not the main ambition, but it was a mixture in there.
I could see both ways because it's definitely I don't know. I kept thinking of Catch-22 the whole time, revisiting this. There's a lot of parallels in this idea of like, an unconventional structure and like a lot of dark humor, to get across this idea that that war just sort of like is unhinged and unfathomable, and it makes no sense at all. And so I think both Vonnegut and Heller are kind of doing the same thing. So I can see like there is a satirical element to it, but then also something like deadly serious, but still humorous. And yeah, I think coming up soon here maybe is like or maybe we already scrolled past it. One of the
We've
other
got
things.
the Indian torture, the infamous Indian torture from the old Western movies.
Yeah. But I think, did we already scroll past or somewhere close to here is where we start getting the 3-panel stories of the characters? There we go, which I thought was like really great and effective.
Yeah, it's like the newspaper comic strips, where they just, you have a very, very limited amount of space. You at most 4 panels, but usually like 3 or 4 panels in a newspaper comic strip, and this is the same format of that. So that's making use of the format. And I thought Montes, is that the guy? Montes' art is Albert Montes' art is actually really, really lovely. Whoops, didn't want to do that. There it is.
Did you see the bad anachronism in it?
Which one?
It's the one where he goes in the pawn shop, and the guy's showing him VHS cassette porn in the year 1969.
Oh, really? I guess I missed that.
No. It's just, frozen in amber in that moment. Time's just wonky. That's all.
No, that's what I mean. The VHS format wasn't even created until 1972. So in other words, you couldn't have.
Yeah. Right.
Umatic hadn't even really appeared. Umatic was the first major form of home video player. You wouldn't have had video porn movies until probably the late 70s, the mid 70s at the very earliest. And prior to that, they used Super 8, little. So I don't know if that anachronism was planted there deliberately, or it's just an oversight?
I think it's interesting to think about either way. More likely, it just reflects the age of the illustrator, who can't conceive of a world without some form of entertainment on demand. Uh, but it's interesting to think about it as being like this weird anachronism of something else that's unstuck in time.
Yeah, maybe it's a fantastical element, indeed, deliberately done. But I want to second Heather's impression that it very much reminded me of Heller's Catch-22 as well, with not quite to the same extent, but rather outrageous satire that masks a deeper tragedy.
Yeah.
I don't like that long chin. He looks like old man Steptoe from Steptoe and Son.
I do love the effective color work here. Very effective, very moody, and puts you in gets the right information across visually.
I also really like, if you scroll down just a teeny bit, we
Mm.
see a lot of the okay, you can stop here, in between the two top panels, that purple bit. Like later on we get introduced to like what's taking us past and what's taking us forward, and
Yeah.
that purple bit is just a visual allusion to like getting unstuck in time. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, like the one of that dimension that the Tralfamadorians are in, and yeah, and it's true, there are a lot more explanations in the novel, because there's more space and more room to explain like how the Tralfamadorians work and everything. But I mean, it's hard to take that too much. I mean, it is what it is. But anyway. And yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, one of the things you just can't get away from is just the sheer horror of warfare, and I mean, it would be impossible to get away from that, and to just see how it was, and certainly the bombing of Dresden, and yeah, I mean, any portrayal of war, I mean, is going to inevitably be anti-war just by its nature.
It's always been one of my observations. The interesting thing is how that war started off. But, the Germans weren't going to bomb London. They were only bombing essential industries in the Blitz.
Yeah.
And the German plane mistakenly dropped bombs on London, and the British guy rang up Hermann Göring and complained about it. And Hermann Göring said, sort of like, when he gets back, I'll have that pilot shot. He got shot down anyway, but that was the attitude. They had an idea that they were going to conduct this war in a Hebraic fashion, but very soon, absolute brutality rules.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a thing you got to watch out for in politics too. They all talk nicey at the start, but eventually the lowest common denominator comes to rule.
Yeah, that certainly comes across when you read this in any of the formats, the novel or the comic or the movie. You just get this sheer waste of human loss of warfare, and I mean, well, I guess I'm not the first to point that out, am I?
I think it's all rational. I'm perfectly in agreement with it all.
Okay.
Well, this is the thing. People say no, but we all share the same qualities. There's a little bit of Adolf Hitler in all of us. And given the right set of circumstances, we'd be dropping the bombs.
I mean, we are in the only country that did actually drop those bombs, but like the big ones. But yeah, just for some food for thought, a little bit other side of this coin, check out The Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker. And also there's a dude who was a general in World War II, and then he did an analysis of like the effectiveness of troops in World War II, and found that most people never shot. Those who did shoot never hit anybody. And so it was a very small minority of people who were actually killing other people, and that people were going out of their way to avoid killing other people. And in fact, he was so convinced this was true, he found a way to examine Civil War sites, and he was able to examine where the lines of the bullets in the trees, because those don't really change. The trees just grow from the top, really. And he was able to find out that there was no way, like most of these bullets were getting hit like way above people's heads, where people's heads would have been. So just fascinating, like the better angels of our nature, they're out there. It's a little reassuring.
So I recall a story is it's a third of soldiers can't shoot to hit somebody. They're the ones you've got to weed out of your army because they're a waste of space. You've got to find out the ones that are strong enough to shoot and kill. They're the ones, because you're spending money on troops. You're putting them on the front line. You're giving them food. Those weaklings are the ones that have to be discovered and weeded out and sent back.
Yeah, I mean, certainly this is called the name of the subtitle of the book, The Children's Crusade. He's making the point that, in fact, so many young recruits, and we're talking young, like 18, 19 years, not 20, just young kids who are doing the fighting, doing the actual on the ground fighting, and they're badly trained. They don't have the right preparation, and they barely know what they're doing, and they just get slaughtered. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to ignore that the least protected are the ones that are going to be the most vulnerable in war.
And you could see in one of those first panels that very young boy, the one who ended up trading for the clogs, like the boots and the clogs, that really young boy. I mean, he was what, 13, 14, something like that. You could just tell it's toward the end of the war, and they were just like, anybody put a gun in anybody's hand at this point, kind of sad.
Yeah, well, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about here. We could talk about the horrors of war if anybody would want to, but how about this? Where does Slaughterhouse-Five rank as work? I mean, would you put it on, I've read seen the movie, read this, and read the novel somewhat. Is it high art? Is it one of the classics and up there with Shakespeare or Milton or whatever you have?
I think you could put it there as a story. It's very significant.
It's affecting. It's moving. I think good art is going to give you something not only to think about, but something that moves you, something that you come away with it a different person. And I think, you can make the argument that this does.
Yeah, kind of building on that. Some of the ways that I judge a work of art are, does it stick with you, and does it change your perspective on things? And this is certainly a story that sticks with you. I certainly like the images of the Dresden bombing, and that, just what a terrible massacre it was. And like that kind of stuff, it doesn't leave you. And then just the weirdness, the idea of getting unstuck in time, and that moments just are, and like you can't change it, so you just kind of let them be and then revisit them kind of in a neutral way. I don't know, there's a lot in here that's really like worth thinking about. I think it's a really good story, but it's not something that I've ever revisited either. So till now.
Yeah, I can see why it made such a huge splash, and it's such a perennial it's on all those book lists of all the books you should read before you die. Top 100 books. Everybody puts this one on there. Yeah, I can see why. I can see it's a worthy work. It's worth it to get the idea, and you can see why it made such a huge splash in when it was published, 1960 something, I think it was.
And in the film, the trails were disembodied, but in the cartoon, I noticed that they're all hands with eyes set in the middle of the palms. I assume that was in the book as well, was
The
it?
novel described them that way differently, but it said, yeah, their eyeballs were in their hands.
Which is sort of like some sort of a Masonic symbol or something like that. Is Kurt Vonnegut trying to give away his secrets, is he? But what about post-traumatic stress syndrome? You know, did Kurt, he was in the Dresden bombing, did he suffer from a post-trauma, I wonder?
That's a good point. Yeah. I don't know much about Kurt Vonnegut, to be honest with you. I don't know much about
I
him.
don't know much, but just based on his description of it, either he suffered from it himself, or, and given the fact that he was in a lot of this story essentially as a young man, it wouldn't be shocking. But also, I mean, so either he did experience post-traumatic stress syndrome, or he knew a lot of people well enough and really listened to their story to fully get it, because there's stuff in here that's really visceral and really moving.
Yeah. Yeah, he says in the foreword in the novel that he assumed it was going to be very, very easy. He would just sit down and just type what he saw, and it would be an easy work for him. And turned out it wasn't easy at all. But he said he was just going to write out exactly what he saw. But obviously, yeah, it's always a little more complicated than that. Yeah, I think it would be inevitable to think that he would have been suffering from some kind of well, they called it shell shock back then. They didn't call it PTSD. Shell shock.
I wonder if the being unstuck in time, for at least for Billy Pilgrim, helps with the PTSD,
Yeah.
or if it's masking, like allows him to kind of escape without fully dealing with it. I just remember from the novel that Billy Pilgrim is such a non-entity. Everything just kind of happens to him. And like there's such a fascinating story happening around such an unfascinating character. He's like the middle of the eddy essentially. And
Right.
it's just, I'm curious what you guys think, if the being unstuck in time, if his understanding of time that way unlocked his ability to like step outside of those moments and not relive them in a like immediate way, or if it wasn't helping, like if it just meant he never dealt with it at all.
Yeah.
If any of you ever had a post-traumatic sort of symptom, I'm not going to talk about it, but I've had one, and they are quite powerful. You might think, oh yeah, so what? And when you experience one, you'll know all about it. It's equivalent to what we're talking about with Heidegger, when Heidegger or these similar guys are saying we don't really know reality. We're looking at through the mists of our own imagination. But when you have that shocking experience, suddenly the real nature of the world is revealed to you, and it's not exactly pleasant. It stabs into you. You don't lose it. You want to forget. You do forget about it, but it keeps on coming back. You want to forget about it, but it keeps on coming back.
Talking about the real nature of reality strikes me as sort of over analyzing something. I have had some interesting experiences in my life, but they were, I certainly wouldn't say they exposed real reality to me. They just were experiences that I went through. I don't know what.
You're still a sleepwalker. You're just sleepwalking through life. You don't know. It's nothing to do with ideas in your head. This is when those ideas get broken down. And whenever anybody says that they got a serious situation with post-trauma, don't laugh at them. It's not a joke.
Oh, I'm not laughing.
Very powerful.
No, obviously experiences can destroy people. I'm not questioning that. I'm just questioning the concept of reality. That's a very different issue.
I've suffered from PTSD.
There is actually a reality.
Sorry. For me, I've suffered PTSD, and it's it's a type of anxiety disorder, at least in my case, in the way I heard it described clinically. And I didn't think about, how that might have imparted the authoring of this novel, actually, if any. Vonnegut's experience of course, being in the Second World War. So
You got to remember that the guy that became sort of a father figure to him for a short while was shot. Whether he witnessed it, I don't know. In the hero of the story witnesses his father figure being shot.
Derby, but yeah, Vonnegut says in the foreword of the novel, anyway, he says, yeah, that really did happen. I mean, he changed everybody's names, obviously. He didn't.
I'm interested that it's subtitled The Children's Crusade, because that's an obvious reference to the Children's Crusade in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be interesting to kind of talk about that, why he chose that particular thing. And I mean, from my understanding of that event, which I'm no expert, but the way it was always taught to me is it was largely pointless. And a lot of children died out of just pure, I mean, they went out of pure motivation, but it was still basically just being ground down, and
Yes.
it's kind of sad and pointless and a waste of,
Yes.
young life.
I believe that is precisely Vonnegut's point. Precisely that. That's exactly the point Vonnegut was attempting to make. Yes.
Does that make FDR the Pope?
I mean, yeah, if you do want to get directly into war, I mean, why war, then you need to read the book titled War is a Racket. War is a Racket by General Smedley Butler. He was a 5-star general, and he wrote the book War is a Racket. It's online, and it's not long. You can read it in an hour. It's not a long book, but he just lays it out that it's all pointless. Well, no, I'll take that back. It does have a point. The point is profit. The point is money. That's the point of war. But it's a racket. It's a con game. And he was a 5-star general, and he knew what it was all about. I mean, you say, well, we have to stop, if you have a villain like the Nazis, yeah. But anyway, read the book. Yeah.
I'm just recollecting when I first saw the film now. I haven't read the book, so I've done the comic and the film. I first saw the film in 1977, I think. Late night TV. I was quite impressed.
Very young and comely Valerie Purnell. What's her name? Valerie Perrine.
Yeah, she was in the Superman movie as well.
That's right, she was. Miss Tessmacher. That's correct, yeah.
Montana, what was it? Montana Wild Hats, was it?
Wild Hack, yeah, that's right.
Not gonna lie, that's the part of the novel and the whole story that bothers me the most.
Really? Okay.
I mean, not in a huge way, but it's just like, it's a little bit making fun of that character, and then he does a lot to kind of redeem her in the eyes of the. But I don't know. I didn't like it. It felt a little icky sometimes, but we'll get there.
Redeem her? What was wrong with her?
Well, just the way that she's introduced is kind of less than. There's some pejorative language used about her, and then eventually you come to really like her and see her in a different way, but that's because you get to know her. And I just think it didn't need to start off in a way of like filling in.
So which medium was that? The medium?
I mean, the
oh, well, in the book, I've only read the first half of the graphic novel so far. And I mean, I barely remember the movie.
Yeah, in the movie there, she had a different sort of introduction. The dad founds his son masturbating to a porn book in the toilet, and he grabbed the porn book and he looked at it and he saw her picture in it. So he became fascinated. Whereas in the comic, maybe that relates to the original book. He finds her picture in the porn store.
Mm.
Well, all right. So one thing that I thought was really great, and you kind of already touched on it, I think, David, early on, that reverse movie
Oh
part.
yeah.
It was just like I found it really, really touching. The way that just simple word choices really bring home this longing for this like fantasy of a world where you could just like magically suck up all the destruction, all the death, all the confusion and fear, and bury it and put it somewhere safe. And then there was a moment too where it's like it gets sucked back into the bomb and then taken back to America where the women dismantle the bombs. And I was like, I found it really touching because I mean, it's a little bit of a cliche, but also this idea of the sort of like maternal, right? That it brought a level to it to me where if it was going forward, the women are part of the war effort. They're supporting the men's effort. They're taking the men's places. But in reverse, they're bringing something that's stereotypically feminine and maternal, this protective like aspect, and it comes back to them. They're the ultimate end there because they have the most important job of dismantling that. And I thought that was kind of touching. I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see a certain poetry in life, but looking at it from that vantage point of everything we're going backwards, and my understanding of physics, physicists say that there is no reason, that it couldn't be the arrow of time couldn't be going in that direction. And it would be a tremendous, way of looking at different way of looking at, cause and effect and how.
It's funny you say that because I was thinking about the exact same thing today, that like physics tells us there's no reason for time's arrow to go one way, and yet it does, who knows?
Yeah.
Or maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, that's what I was saying with Heron earlier. I was saying if you do look at all of life as one solid block and there's nothing you can do to change it, yeah, that does eliminate free will. Well, okay, but there's not really anywhere you can go with that. I mean, what can you do with that? Okay, so you can't change, what's happened because it's always happened and always will happen. We're all just puppets, apparently. But we got into this with some of the Alan Moore stuff that we've done in previous comic selections. We did. Well, if anybody here has read Watchmen by Alan Moore with the Dr. Manhattan character, but he's done other things like that, From Hell. And other
So have we seen this illustrator in any of the previous comic sessions we've done?
Albert Montes, my understanding is he's a Spaniard. He's a Spanish illustrator.
Well, we won't hold that against him, but has he done any of the comics that we've previously reviewed?
No.
All righty, yeah.
Does he seem familiar?
Oh, it's just it's two sequences, two cartoons, which has a bird twittering, and he's using the same system of letters to express the sound of the tweet, as I've seen in one of the comics we've reviewed before. So maybe you just copied that.
Mm.
Well, okay, so yeah, Montana is introduced. She's just in one panel. She's just lying on the floor, wakes up, and confused. What? Everything is all right. Please don't be afraid. Where am I? You've been kidnapped like me. You're on the planet Trell Famine Matador. I have to let that pronounce it. In their zoo where the human exhibit. If we decide to, the Trells are hoping to see us, mate. what are you talking about? You're not making any sense. Then she sees all the trowels and she goes, ah! I'm trying to figure out, is this a bit
Got it. Finally. There it is.
that where she's introduced, what's wrong about her in the introduction? Was it Heather that you didn't like?
Well, this is on 109, so I don't know if Heather's actually gotten to this.
No, I haven't quite gotten to this in the comic. So I can't fully speak to this here. But in the novel, it's just like it's a little bit making the person, it's a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Infantilizing and just, I mean, even here I'm seeing hints of what certainly in the novel got built out more, that she's kind of like, it takes her longer to understand or accept it, that there's like a naivete, or just like almost like she's like a dumb bimbo type thing, except she isn't. I don't know, it's just like I said, it's mostly reacting to the novel, but I imagine there, unless they drastically rewrite the character in the novel, in the graphic novel, there's
Okay,
gonna be
well, I haven't read the
things like that.
novel,
I don't think.
but looking at the cartoon, every character in it is infantile.
That's true.
I was going to say he must have been a misogynist because all the women were infantile.
Oh, yeah. No, the women are terrible in this novel.
Yeah.
All the men are infantile as well. There's nobody with a sensible view, except perhaps the main character towards the end of his life has sort of woken up a bit.
Yeah, you always get that kind of argument, especially like with James Bond movies. Everybody points out with James Bond that he was a misogynist. Oh, yeah? Well, does he treat men any better? No, actually, he treats men worse, actually. So, yeah. What's that? It's in a, what do you call that? No, I don't know. Misanthropy. That's,
yeah, I was discussing that with Natalia yesterday. I said I was probably a misanthrope.
Yeah. No, yeah, James Bond is a misanthrope. He's not a misogynist. Yeah.
Yeah, I think your melancholy persona. This is a thing where the hero of the comic is a melancholy persona. He's got a certain type of strength in that he sees the world perhaps a little bit more realistically, but he's not going to do anything about it. He's not going to put himself out on the limb. You ever heard of the melancholy temperament?
Yeah.
Which, Rudolf Steiner popularized.
Yeah, that is something that I think you brought it up, Heather, with the main character, Billy. Yeah, he doesn't actually,
he's got a mind, he's got an imagination. He can see all the detail, but he's not going to jump out and try to change anything. This is, the melancholics will tend to have a fairly, imaginative appraisal of the world, but they're just going to stand there, they're just going to be wallflowers. This is the story of a wallflower.
Yeah.
Jim Morrison, the pop star, that's what the rest of the Doors said about him, that he was a wallflower when they met him. But this is the thing, he was the one who supposedly had an IQ of 149.
Yeah, I've heard that. He only really came alive on stage. Well.
Oh, you've read the Sugarman book, have you? Nobody gets out of here alive.
I think, I think that I remember reading that one. Yeah, back when that movie came out.
It's just the four of us in here now.
Looks like it. We scared everyone else off.
Heron said he had to leave for a bit. Maybe he's been kidnapped by a flying saucer.
I always worry that I talk too much, but well, there's just four of us now, so we'll just have to. You can fight me.
Yeah, very certainly it can't be said that this is a traditional narrative where beginning, middle, and end. I think that's part of Vonnegut's point, and certainly the adapters, both the film and this graphic novel, were taking that along. It's not it's not about the plot of just going from one point to another, because I don't know if it even has much of a plot, and in the sense of
It couldn't have been original, though, in that
Yeah.
concept. There must have been novels which had used that jumping around system prior.
Yeah.
Yeah, Catch 22 was a little earlier than that. There are definitely novels before this that play around with structure to varying degrees of effect. One of the things I think that Vonnegut does so effectively is make it still make sense, that you can read this and still be, and this character that's so passive and such a blank slate, but you can still be entertained, you can still want to turn the page, you can still make sense of him jumping back and forth in time, and this very strange concept of time that's foreign to how we understand things, on top of this, talking about war in a certain perspective. Like, you're really melding a lot of different genres and stuff, and Vonnegut did a great job being able to take the reader into that and keep them along with him. So yeah, definitely it's a big swing, but I think he does knock it out of the park. It's a nice thing to see. Did anybody else think of Stephen Crane as well from The Red Badge of Courage? Just because Billy Pilgrim is so like outside of things and kind of like trying to avoid any kind of combat, watching things, just from like the outside more. I just thought, sometimes I thought about, and just like his pure vulnerability, again, that's something that the illustrations highlighted for me, was the vulnerability of this young scrawny kid. I thought of Stephen Crane a few times.
Yeah, he's a bit of a cipher. It's possible just to make that more identifiable for the reader, that the reader can put themselves in that position. He doesn't have a whole lot of defining characteristics. Yeah, it's hard to know what his personality really is. He just seems to be going from one step to the next without much agency. But what could you do if you are in that position where you don't actually have any ability to change what happens? You're a puppet, and you just go where the strings tell you to go. Yeah, I know. I'm not sure the metaphysics are entirely sound, because as I said, even if you accept that, okay, it's all just one solid thing, well then, all right, but you don't go anywhere with that. Okay, what now? Because there's no guilt, there's no remorse, it's just is. Everything just is. So you do what
when he meets the Tralfamadorians, they talk about a war, like how the universe ends, and that we're just going to let the button happen or let the button get pushed because that's how it happens. And do you think that they had a choice? Like, could they have changed the future? Is it set in stone?
Well,
or is it just that people aren't caring enough? People are so resigned, just like this character, to this idea that it is what it is, and therefore it becomes what it is, because people are so passive about it.
Yeah, that might be a good point. Yeah, maybe we could make this a better world if people got together, but that's obviously never going to happen. That might be a point. Yeah. If you really do think about the whole thing about the Tralfamadorians, it kind of does fall apart if you really, really, really think about it. Obviously they know enough to know English. They know how to speak English. They know enough about, so why wouldn't they know, things like the mating and so on and so on? And it kind of does fall apart if you really, really thought about it.
Well, they're just seeing things from their own perspective, the way that they know it. So, he gets convinced that as humans, because we only see time like this, he has the metaphor of like being on a train track and you're looking through a 6-inch pipe or whatever. But there's a sense in which they're looking through a 6-inch pipe as well. There's aspects of time and free will and things like this, like being able to affect change in time, that they have a really narrow view of, and that human beings are the ones with the larger scope on, which I don't think gets really explored in the novel, but it's kind of an interesting way to think about it.
Well, I'll probably say what the in part the story is about is that most people think in terms of aspiration. We're taught to aspire to some greater cause, or become an important person, or do something worthwhile, or all that sort of stuff. And what the story is saying is that that's not what it's about. What it is about is coming to know yourself. You see, all the aspirations end up nowhere. That's the achievement, that he's learnt to know what he is, where he is.
What does he learn about himself?
Oh well, that's in it's where the trails are explaining the position, aren't they? That okay, we go to what was it, page? Oh no, not that page. 107 was it? Or was it a bit earlier? Where the Trells are explaining their dilemma. Right, that's
About
page 97. That's it, 97.
okay, here.
When he's saying, what he stands up for and what he believes in, and how can we, stop the bad things happening? And then they explain you can't stop the bad things happening. They're all predetermined. We found, they say, at some point that all you can do is live for the good times and try to forget about the bad. But why I'm saying this is I always ask this question that, we have aspirations, but did we ever really want to be who we are? Did we even want to be human? Did we even want to be to exist? See, I'm a theist, therefore I believe in some sort of God. I don't believe in the nicey God of the Christians. I think I'd sort of go for a more indifferent sort of pagan sort of deity.
More Old Testament than New Testament?
No, not even that. The God of the Bible is very moralistic, whether it's a God of the Old Testament or the New Testament. I go for a God that is putting us through a program. Would I want to be the person I am? The person I am is something that's many qualities. Would I have chosen that? Let's say I was some little monadic speck somewhere floating around the cosmos, and God comes along and said, I'm going to put you on Earth and I'm going to make you that person. I'm going to put you on this dumb fucking planet Earth where everyone's against each other and at each other's throats, and I expect you to have a good time. Would I have chosen that? Or is there something better in the universe than being that? So why am I here? We're so used to living in our suits of meat and thinking, oh, yeah, that's who I am. I've got a suit of meat on, therefore I'll aspire to all the things that meat wants. And I think, when I get what meat wants, yeah. And I suddenly realised, no, I'm being fooled. Why do I want to be meat? Why do I want to be the things that meat wants? I'm a monad, this is a philosophical idea. I'm this little speck of spiritual substance floating around in the universe. I could have been a woman. You know, I could have been a cat. I could have been Adolf Hitler. I could have been Vincent van Gogh. You know, what is the desirable existence? Is there such a thing as a desirable existence? And if I imagine a desirable existence, in the absolute sense, is it really desirable?
Is there a desirable existence in this novel? Is there, I don't think there's any time in his life that I would personally choose to inhabit.
I think he was very happy in his cage with the Montana. That was his happiness.
He's
With some
definitely
intelligent
safe there.
company.
He's definitely safe there, and what's the word I'm looking for? He's safe and taken care of. So that's certainly nice. But there's something, I mean, I don't know about you. I don't know if this is, it's interesting because definitely in the novel too, you get the sense that that is the best time for him. But just me as a person, I'm like, but I still wouldn't want to live in a cage being watched all the time and answering the same stupid questions over and over about time and only two sexes and blah blah blah, and like, you know, having sex as part of a show and all this kind of thing. Like, I don't know. It's interesting. There's something about this novel. I keep talking about the novel because it's the part I've read all the way through, but there's something about this story that's really interesting because there's something that happens with the reader, which is very different than what's happening with the main character. Because if you ask me what the main character's arc is, I couldn't freaking tell you. I don't know if he really has one, but me as a reader, I go through an arc where at the end, I do come to a place of peace and a different kind of understanding of the place in time and history of these horrible events, and a way to understand how to like step outside of those, and see them, because we can't change the past. And so having a kind of acceptance about them, I don't know, it's an interesting exercise that the novel does, because again, I don't think that the character changes at all. He's such a blank slate. I don't really think anything changes for him as a character, but me as a reader, I'm going somewhere.
No, I think he rises to the occasion. You've got to imagine in the end, he's when, according to the cartoon, that America's been beaten by the Chinese and broken up into 20 different states, and he's speaking in one of them in the mid-70s. And he's saying, well, he's trying to explain what he's experienced, and you know, he is starting to rise to the occasion. So he starts off very passive, but he is trying to do something towards the end.
Which is fascinating if he's internalized this idea that it's frozen in amber, that he's only doing it, even in that, there's a passivity to it, because he's doing it because it just is. That's how that moment is structured. He's not doing it because he thinks that he can actually change anything. He's not even necessarily doing it. This particular kind of character, you get the sense that he's doing it because he like has to. It's the thing you do because that's how that moment is structured for reasons that are ineffable. But yeah, so there's an activity to it, but there's still a passiveness to it because the moment's like already structured that way. You can't change it. Or can you? You know, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I would say he does come to an acceptance by the end. He certainly has accepted and acquired a peacefulness about it, that this is the way it is, and there's nothing wrong with it. It just is.
Yeah.
And he seems all right at it, and he's accepting his own death at the end. And maybe there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, well, you had that other character in it, that little gangster sort of guy who had it in for everybody, eternal revenge.
Yeah.
The other private who, said, "Oh, I'm going to kill you." One day somebody's going to come around to your door and
Yeah.
Oh, the
shoot
Lazaro guy.
yeah, shoot your pecker off and give you a moment to think about life without your pecker for the rest of your life, and then he'll shoot you in the stomach. And of course, that would have been based somewhere on a real persona. So, you got Lazaro's just all revenge,
Yeah.
with very few light moments.
Yeah, him putting the glass or whatever in the thing for the dog, because the dog,
Yeah.
who even knows? We only saw 3 panels of it. It was like the dog did something a dog does, and then he wanted to get revenge. It's like, oh, and then of course that's juxtaposed with Derby, who seemed like such a great guy, and then we know Derby gets killed and Lazaro lives, and then you have this like uncharacter, he also lives. It's like so arbitrary, and this is all also juxtaposed with the Brits who like break the American's arm, and then they're chatting it up with the Nazi who's just like, oh, I'm so glad I met you guys are so cool, and you're just like, what's happening here? Definitely there's no.
I'm having a little bit of difficulty. Why are you having a problem there?
Why have a problem with the
what's going on? You got the Nazis saying, "Oh, I'm really glad I have some, cultured people to talk to," rather than these Americans. They're giving Americans a bum rap, and it's good to see so many here today.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's not. No, it is something that's semi-present in the story, in the fact that it's the freaking Nazis, right? And they've done horrible things. In fact, these Americans are so desperate and hungry, and a bunch of them died because they were just locked in train cars without food or a place to defecate or anybody taking care of their wounds or anything like that. And that's not even, remember, like the whole thing with the candles, like the fat was rendered from, Romani and queers and all this stuff and Jews, and you're just like, and then
that's actually, I have to bring that up. That's actually a false story.
I mean, it may be, but it's what's in the story. And that's literally like, that's the light that's lighting up that scene or the scenes around it. Like, this is the context of that particular exchange. So it is a bit chilling that the people, I don't know, humans are very, very complicated. But
that's true.
It is a little bit chilling that the Brits were just so like, that the Brits and the Nazis got along that well in the prisoner of war camp.
Do you realize the mistake you're making in philosophy? It's what's the name? They identify it with Hannah Arendt, but the concept actually came from Dostoevsky.
Well, go ahead. I'm waiting.
Well, this is a story that, what was it? The banality of evil, that we forget at the end of the day that Eichmann was a human being with much of the same feelings the rest of us have. That German in the comic is a human being with much of the same feelings as the rest of it. And even Montana Wildhack, even though you'd think is this cheap blue movie star, is still a human being with much of the same emotions. That you're falling into the error of dehumanizing what you don't like.
No, that's not what I'm doing at all. What I'm saying is, I think it's right to question moments like that, and that's what this novel does. In fact, what's his face? Pilgrim. I want to say Scott Pilgrim, but obviously not. Billy Pilgrim, when he meets the Tralfamadorians and he's in the zoo and he's talking about, I saw a schoolgirl massacred by people who were there believing they were fighting evil, or boiled alive by people who were convinced that they were fighting evil. But then those people were later, massacred by the fathers and brothers of that schoolgirl. So this complex layer of humanity, inhumanity, right and wrong. And there's a sense in which this novel is confronting that and questioning that and encouraging us to do that. And then there's another sense in which it's kind of asking us to step away from that and just kind of accept it how it is.
Well, I think it's bringing up what we would term as absurdism. That's the existential philosophy which points out that aspects of life are absurd. But however, there's a fallacy in that, in who are we to judge what is absurd?
Well, we're the only ones to judge, because we create the society, we define absurdity, we're the thinkers, we're the only ones, as far as we know, that are around to judge.
Maybe you haven't. Maybe you're just being led on a string by the gods.
Perhaps. I don't know. Not judging seems worse, though. I mean, to just be passive about it, to me, to just be like, well, that's how it is, so it goes, right? That's the refrain here. So it goes, so it goes, so it goes. So if you just say so it goes to everything, then nothing ever changes. And then the long arc of history does what it wants, and it never bends toward justice. But it's not going to bend toward justice if we're not saying, wait, is this just at all? Should we be friends with Nazis? I don't know. Should we just boil schoolgirls alive, whether they're our enemy or not?
That wasn't strictly intentional. They tried to get into a water tower to escape the fire. Of course, that was a bad choice. I don't know. They massacred the men that did it. So I don't know. Was there a sequence where one of the planes crashed and they took their revenge? I think the Japanese were noted for that viewed the bomber pilots as war criminals.
I would find it hard to disagree with that, to be totally frank. But I heard, okay, so I'm a bit of a plane nerd. I was listening to a podcast. This dude did this little remote, what's it called? Remote little segment, right? And he goes to the cafes and stuff in these airports, and he'll just talk about the interesting ones. And so there was this brand new one at this place in Texas, this airport in Texas, and it has this big long window where you can see the runways, the takeoffs, the departures, all this stuff. And if you're a plane nerd, it's just geeky, and you get to eat your steak and drink your wine and whatever. But yeah, except that, so one of the things that he was really excited about was on the top of the ceiling was the actual propeller from the Enola Gay. And he never at any point, or none of the other hosts at any point, stopped to question the message that's sending. It's not just a cool piece of decor. It was so many people who were killed. Do Japanese tourists never come to Texas? Do you really just want to be oh yeah, I mean, if you just had a gate from Auschwitz to open the door, you'd be sending a message. And it's just interesting to me that we don't even think about those bombings in that way, because I find it difficult to say that the people who dropped the bombs were not culpable in any way.
And that was all the fault of what was his name, FDR.
I mean, Truman was the one who authorized it.
This was a problem. FDR was the bad guy in all that. If FDR had have said to the Japanese, you want to start any funny business with us, we will go to town on you. But instead, he just adopted a passive position. He just said, okay, we're creating an oil embargo. And the Japanese got the idea that, if we rough up the Americans a bit, well, they're not going to want to fight a war with us. They'll come to a reasonable solution. But that wasn't the reaction the Japanese got from the Americans. The Americans, after Pearl Harbor, were out after their blood. And FDR, if he had have said to the Japanese, you start something with us, we will finish it. We don't care how long it takes. The Japanese wouldn't have attacked. I don't know about the Germans. You wouldn't have had that war if the politician, well, it was again a bit the case with Hitler, they just let him get away with stuff. So he got the idea every time he was getting away with something a bit bigger, they had to thumped him down day one. No World War II.
Well, the causes of World War II are complex.
Well, you asked
in many
why these
areas.
bad things happen, and the bad things with the Japanese was a clear case that FDR just decided to be passive, and he wasn't confronting enough with the Japanese. He didn't want to, He got the wrong idea, he just had to put them in their place and let him see, look how powerful America is. We've got the oil, we've got the industry. Okay, you got a little bit of industry, but you got no oil. Now, we have a real war and we go hell bent for leather. You're going to be the losers.
I mean, people at the time, it was like it was like 20 years after World War I, which people like just totally changed. It rewired people's kind of understanding of war and nationality. And so people were, and coming out of the Depression, people were very much like, and until World War II, or like World War I to a lesser extent, but really World War II, America wasn't an interventionist country. I think that's not true either, but we tried to pretend we weren't. We didn't have an outward looking like policy really. People didn't want to go to war.
From the shores of Tripoli.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's a dichotomy. There's this like 19th century idea of like manliness and the like glories of war. And so like World War II is this interesting transition where you have the death throes of that which survived World War I, which World War I is almost entirely caused by this like idea of.
Was it Teddy Roosevelt riding around in 1900 on his horse with his 6-gun in Cuba, was it, or something like that?
Yeah, we did some bad things in the 19th century. Oh, man. But yeah, I mean, I know like in Japan, I heard that people in Japan were telling the emperor, like, don't do this. We're a tiny island with limited resources. You're going to go against like China and America. This seems ill-advised. And he's like, I'm going to do it. We're Japan. We're the best.
Oh, no, it wasn't the emperor. He was a very passive figure. There was a war party and a peace party, and the war party in Japan gained the upper hand.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know super extra a lot about it, but it just seemed like it fits the idea, like any kind of teeny tiny island like that, just being like, yeah, we're the best. I don't know. It's just like resource wise, it doesn't seem to add up, but.
Well, that was its whole problem, was it was dependent on the external resources and it didn't have the empire that took in those resources.
Yeah, same with Germany and
the wicked Western Anglo-Saxon buggers had grabbed most of the world, whether they were American or Commonwealth.
Yeah. Kitty.
What can you do?
No, I'm just saying the world has a sign above it, abandon all hope ye who enter.
I'm telling you, read The Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker. He does a really great job of showing how over time, the world has actually gotten much less violent and people are much less likely to die violently now than at any point in human history. And that even though we have our spikes, the overall trend is down. It's like up, down, but overall down. So
it's describe him as delusional.
I mean, read it. It's very convincing.
Oh,
it's not just Pinker who's talking that way too.
That's the dream, I'm a Trump worshipping pessimist. And I see that's the problem with the left. I used to be a lefty myself. And then one day I woke up, the huge problem with the left is this. The left is vain. They're dreamers, vanity. It's a belief that they aspire to something which is just a dream. And that's what I was doing not all that long ago. And then one day I just woke up. It's nonsense. Human nature is bad. It's self-interested, it's egotistic, and that's always going to come up the winner.
But it's also generous and giving and kind and cooperative. Like, we have so many impulses. There aren't other creatures that can get along in as big of groups as we can. When a disaster happens, people risk their lives to help out. They give their resources to help out, their time. Like, these impulses are there. And if we were much worse, if in the balance we were like so much worse than we are good, there's no way there'd be 7 billion of us. There just wouldn't. There wouldn't be cities of millions plus. Just it wouldn't be possible.
Most human beings are favourable and fair when the wind blows fair, but if the wind changes direction, watch out.
I think there are plenty of instances on the individual and the societal scale of people helping each other out, even during the worst times and the hardest times. And in fact, oftentimes it's the people who are hurting the most who are the most willing to give what little that they have. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of really great things that human beings can do. I mean, look at how much global cooperation it takes just for this to happen. Like, there's only 5 of us here on the call, but behind that are the people who developed the software and educated the people who run the servers. And like, some of the aspects of it are bad and some are good, but on the whole, like, hopefully
ego drives it all.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's talk about something else, because I had this exact conversation with somebody 2 days ago, and I'm bored of it, or not bored of it. It was frustrating that then, and it's frustrating now. But there's plenty to talk about.
Well, God sent you a second demon.
Indeed. Well, I have to remind myself always, like, even if I have 2 demons on my shoulder, I can still be my own angel. You're always responsible for yourself. So unless you're frozen in amber, I don't know. I mean, that's interesting. We're kind of reprising the themes in this novel of like passivity versus activity. The Tralfamadorians or whatever say that Earth is the only planet that talks about free will. Interesting to think about. Is there free will? I don't know. Perhaps it doesn't matter.
Well, there is an aspect of free will in the story, and that is he can choose what to remember. He can rise to the point where he can control his memories and choose it's what they say, live for the good times and try to forget about the bad.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. But in so doing, they lead to the end of the universe.
Well, it's got to end someday.
I suppose. That doesn't mean that you have to be responsible for it. Or perhaps it does.
That's an interesting aspect of the novel. It's the super advanced creatures finally reached that sort of what would you say was Faustian moments of having the power to destroy the universe, so they do it. If you're ever familiar with one of my favourite characters, Dr. Faustus from the play by Marlowe in the Elizabethan era. That's the guy who sells his soul to the devil for youth for 24 years. Helen of Troy is his bed partner, and an imp named Mephistopheles who does tricks for him.
Yeah. An alchemist. Fascinating. Dr. John Faustus. But let's look at another we could compare this to like Arrival, which does kind of the same thing of like being unstuck in time and every moment already exists. And that main character, the kinds of choices that she makes, and not only that, but the aliens that visit that bring this revelation to her, their choices are much more hopeful. They know that when they come to Earth, people are going to try to bomb them, and it's going to take forever to like figure it out, and there's going to be all this distrust, and some of their people are going to die or whatever. But they're just like, this is how it is. Like, this is the moment, and ultimately the goal is we came here to cooperate, and we're going to teach you how to cooperate, and this is how it happens. And for her, you know, she has that moment. Did anyone else see Arrival? Because I am about to spoil the
I've
hell
seen
out of it.
I don't remember it too well. They had those aliens that looked like trees or something in it, didn't you?
They're like octopus thingies.
Yeah.
But so spoiler alert, right? Like, she learns that her daughter dies of cancer at a young age, but she still decides to have those. She knows it's going to happen, and she still decides to inhabit those moments. And it's unclear if she's able to control remembering or not, like being in a certain, it seems like maybe she has some control over what time period she's in. But it's just interesting that it's the same kind of structure happening, but whereas Billy Pilgrim is so sort of like passive about it, Amy Adams' character is more like compassionate and has a belief in change, and so do the aliens who understand this unstuck in time not nonsense, but concept. It's interesting to like compare and contrast those, and what we can maybe learn about what this particular story is trying to do, or perhaps succeeding or failing at doing, or whatever.
I'm just trying to check up here whether I can find the history of out of sequence novels. Yeah, a novel which doesn't follow the standard time sequence, but throws stuff around in the story. So I can't imagine that Slaughterhouse-Five was the first one to do this.
No, it is interesting. I kept thinking about it. It's definitely part of this time. And Orwell's kind of part of this tradition, but too early for the pattern that I'm going to describe here, of like people who were in World War II and then come back, and around the era of Vietnam are writing like reflections of their war experience that are critical, that are darkly humorous, that the moral stance is real squishy, that are playing around with time structure, but are also very much describing or exploring the psychological impacts of war on the people who fight it and the society that does it. It's interesting. There's quite a few books and things that come out at this time. I mean, like, gosh, even Rambo is essentially supposed to, I mean, I've never seen the movie, but I've heard descriptions of it recently. And of course, it's based off books. And the idea of like a returning vet who's like anti-war, you know, it's just interesting that there's like this whole thing happening at this time in the 60s and 70s of people who were in typically World War I, but World War II, but also maybe Korea. And then they're making their novels, and it's hitting right at this time where people are questioning because of the Vietnam War. And I think it's interesting. It's part of that tradition.
Okay, they call it the non-linear narrative. So when did it first appear? Began in ancient times and was established as a convention of epic poetry with Homer's Iliad. Oh, right. Well, we're not safe at all, are we? We're going right back to the virtual beginning here.
Right. I mean, even Milton starts in media res with Satan, it's in the middle, and then he pops back in time, and then it gets boring because
So are you sympathy for the devil, or you're on God's side?
Well, it's a truth universally acknowledged that Satan makes a much more interesting character than people who are very, very good all the time and never make mistakes.
So I suppose the second thing is there Slaughterhouse-Five is very much in the modern tradition of the non-linear, which probably had a beginning in more recent times. Non-linear novels, right? Wuthering Heights. Oh, okay, cool. You read that
a
one,
few
Heather?
times. Huh?
You've read it. You read the book, have you?
Oh yeah, I've read it a few times. I'm a Bronte completist, but it's not my favorite, that's for sure. I don't really remember anything about it.
Go way back in time. That's the earliest place I find my paternal ancestors is in the same town they lived in.
Oh, cool.
Fortin. Yeah. I had an ancestor who left there in the 1790s. He married a woman 10 years older than himself, which is most unusual. He was 18 and she was 28. But prior to that, I can find the name going back to the early 1600s.
Do you think there's a reason, or can we explore what's being accomplished in this story by jumping around in time?
I'm thinking of there was actually another film which I quite like, which spawned a load of sequels I didn't like at all, Future Cop or Trances. And that has a guy that is sent traveling in time, but he can only go back to the body of an ancestor. So he's pursuing this, the ultimate time traveling criminal back to the 20th century. The time traveling criminal has taken over the body of an ancestor, and so the cop has to go down the line and get in the body of one of his ancestors and trying to hunt the time criminal down.
Is it just the two of us talking now? Come on, somebody, speak up. I'm gonna take a second here and look back at the novel or the graphic novel and find some more things to talk about here.
Yeah, sure. What app did you say you were using? You're on a desktop or an iPad or something?
Yeah, I'm on my desktop, my laptop, and there's a Google
Windows?
Chrome. There's a Google plugin for reading that particular format that I found.
Yeah, because you said it was too big for your, so
yeah, I mean,
that's
whatever.
unusable. That's unusable as far as I'm concerned. So
perhaps I just wasn't in a position to be spending a lot of time and effort on it. I was just like,
so if you're assuming you're on a Windows machine, you want C display X to read a comic file. Let me get that for you. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, cdisplayx.com. Yeah, because things that are it sounds like it couldn't do anything over 100 megs. Then it's not going to work. But that's the best comic file reader.
And you're going to watch another Bakshi cartoon soon. Yeah, I very much love Bakshi's Wizards. It's one of my absolute favorites.
Tomorrow. Coonskin. Ralph Bakshi. Yeah.
Fritz the Cat I have seen. I didn't quite like Fritz the Cat as much.
Kind of. Some people might object to that being a selection for Black History Month. But you see, I mean, that might be worth the conversation, though. What was it about that movie that, should be discussed. The images in that movie.
Indeed.
Well, maybe it'll engender a good conversation. We'll see.
There was one thing, this is a little past the page 99, but something that I did get to and read was starting on page 106, when they're getting chummy with that Nazi guy, Nazi doctor dude, he's talking about the American guy who I guess became a Nazi, and his view of America. I thought that was interesting, and if nobody minds, I'd like to just read it real quick and then maybe we could talk about it.
All right, 106. I already closed. All right, let me pull it back up again. Yeah, there it is.
All right, so he says, a monograph just arrived from the German Association of Prison Officials. It's about Americans. Would you like me to read it to you while you tend to him? Sure. It is by one Howard W. Campbell Jr. He is a former American who has risen high in the German ministries, so he would know. Before defecting, Howard was a playwright in Schenectady, New York. Some said he had the highest IQ of all war criminals. Nice. America is the and then it says he would later hang himself while awaiting trial. So it goes. America is the wealthiest nation on earth. Its people are mainly poor, and poor Americans are urged to hate themselves. It is, in fact, a crime for an American to be poor, even though America is a nation of poor. Every other nation has folk traditions of men who were poor but extremely wise and virtuous, and therefore more esteemed than anyone with power and gold. No such tales are told by the American poor. The meanest eating or drinking establishment owned by a man who is himself poor is very likely to have a sign on its wall asking a cruel question. If you're so smart, why ain't you rich? Americans, like human beings everywhere, believe many things that are obviously untrue. The most destructive untruth is that it is very easy for any American to make money. They will never acknowledge how hard money is to come by. Therefore, those who have no money blame themselves. This inward blame has been a treasure for the rich and powerful who have had to do less for their poor, publicly and privately, than any other ruling class since Napoleonic times. This unprecedented mass of undignified poor who do not love one another because they do not love themselves is the most startling thing America has produced. Once this is understood, the disagreeable behavior of Americans in German prisons ceases to be a mystery. I don't remember if it goes on after that. Oh, right. A prison administrator dealing with captured Americans for the first time should be warned. Expect no brotherly love, even between brothers. There will be no cohesion between the individuals. Each will be a sulky child who often wishes he were dead. They are the most self-pitying, least fraternal, dirtiest prisoners of war, incapable of concerted action on their own behalf. They despise any leader from among their own number and refuse to follow or even listen to him on the grounds that he was no better than they were and that he should stop putting on airs. I just think it's interesting because one, super duper insightful, definitely hits home, very much fits like this particular moment as well. However, it's spoken by an American who went to go be a Nazi and in fact apparently was tried for war crimes. So it just so fascinating. It reflects so many of the layers that are happening in this novel of like what's good, what's bad, who's good and who's bad, and everybody can contain both. But certainly I just remembered reading that and just being like, woof, that hits home.
Yeah.
Well, the Nazis were a very mercenary pack of characters, a very mercenary form of politics. It was they were preoccupied with the whole Darwinistic concept of survival of the fittest, and it's funny coming out of the Nazi actually that the Nazis were the chief extollers of the idea that if you end up down the bottom, you deserve to be there. You are a failure, a Darwinistic failure. So yeah, I find that aspect of the story a bit funny. That in the end, it was the German or the Nazis. The Nazis were extollers of dog eat dog. That's even Himmler said to it. That's a problem with us Germans. We need to learn to become more like the Anglo-Saxons. So certainly the Germans themselves did have a tradition of being more socially cohesive, which of course is the odd thing is they're consciously socially cohesive, but I would say on a real level, personally, they're spiritually not very social, probably I'd describe as very individualistic. And I think it's the Anglo-Saxons who are often culture-wise much more socialistic in their behaviour. I could be talking crap at this point.
I think it's interesting that the Nazi idea, and let's face it, in America, even at this time, quite prominent, the idea that people who aren't as successful or whatever, or socially acceptable, are the ones who should be weeded out. It's belied by the process of war. There's the pictures on page 70 of them in the shower, right? And you have Derby, who's looks very athletic, fit. He seems like you have his 3-panel thing, which shows him to be a good dad and a teacher and a leader, kind person. And then he's next to like the horrible dude who kills a dog, and Billy Pilgrim, who's like scrawny and sort of passive and basically useless. They live, he dies. Like, it just really kind of shows the lie that there's something so very arbitrary. War certainly heightens the arbitrariness of existence, I suppose, or morality.
Existential, is it an existential sort of view? It's there was expressed in Apocalypse Now, the movie, where the general's trying to explain to Marlowe that good does not always triumph over evil.
No, it doesn't.
No, that's the fairy tale which we're brought up with, that the good guy, guy with the white hat comes into town, cleans up the town and waltzes out, and which but unfortunately it's a Darwinistic universe.
But is it? Because if it was a Darwinistic universe, then Derby would have survived, Billy Pilgrim would have died, Lazaro, depending on the ultimate moral compass of the universe, may have lived, may have not. If the universe was like the strongest, most tenacious one, then yeah, maybe Lazaro would have lived. If it's like the most moral, best leader, fittest, strongest dude is gonna live, then Lazaro would have died. But you have this whole range, but that's just not how it plays out. And even with Warner, whatever his name is, the jerky private dude, like, he dies thinking only of vengeance. Like, there isn't any it's not a Darwinistic universe. It's just it's a universe that does not give one single shit.
The fittest have survived.
Have they?
That's
'Cause
the way it works.
is Billy
You're- you're-
Pilgrim
you're-
the fittest,
you're-
or is he
you're-
just the luckiest?
You're creating your image of what you think is the fittest, but in those circumstances, we could argue that the fittest survives.
Please do, because I don't see a way in which necessarily the fittest survived. That I don't see a way in which the characters that do survive did not have a heaping helping
Who
of
was it?
luck.
What was his name again? Philby, the real stand-up guy.
Derby.
That's it. Derby. Well, he made the huge error of stealing the teapot, which, you know, point was the teapot. He wasn't really hurting anybody by picking up the teapot, but he had a positive outlook. I'll get this great teapot as a souvenir. I'm not hurting anybody by taking it, but it was against the rules. So a lack of caution did him in, because he was off with his own sort of fond impressions about the cosmos, and he just wasn't enough of a pessimist. And this is why I exist in the world, to spread the religion of pessimism.
Well, we don't know anything about the people who were massacred in Dresden. We don't know anything about the school children or a schoolgirl who was boiled alive, or her brothers, or we don't know how pessimistic or optimistic they were, but they didn't survive. And yet, right, so Billy Pilgrim and Warby, whatever, I'll call him Warner, whatever his name is, they survived that initial thing where the two other scouts get killed just by pure chance, because he gets taken out of time and then the other guy stays to like beat him up, and then those two leave because they're like, fuck these guys, they're anchors. Then they get shot. So then it seems like Billy Pilgrim and the other guy are lucky, but then the other guy dies senselessly, pointlessly in a train car. There's so much luck, like who's right, who's wrong, like who's the best, who's pessimistic, who's optimistic, who's playing by the rules, who's not, what are the rules, you know? It's arbitrary.
Yeah, very chance dominates, that's true. But in the end, it will be the survival of the fittest in the long run.
Well, even Darwin wouldn't say that. Let's see here. What else we got going on here? So Billy Pilgrim's motto thing on his wall in his optometrist office, I'm on page, what am I in? 41, is the AA prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom always to tell the difference. So, I mean, that could be the overall theme or like arc of this story. I would say definitely you as a reader and him as a character come to get serenity, to be able to accept things that he can't change. The Tralfamadorians say that he can't change anything. So then I'm not sure where the courage, like, I think the big question is the courage to change the things that you can, like, that's a big question kind of left open in this story. And then the wisdom to tell the difference, I believe that Billy Pilgrim is like supposed to have sort of achieved that, except the answer is you can't change anything. So I don't know. Interesting little idea there to explore.
Yeah, that was in the, well, I don't know, in the novel, that was on the locket that Montana has on her neck. Picture of her mother in there, and it's inscribed on the case.
Yeah.
I was just brought up the Nietzschean issue of eternal recurrence.
Yeah.
So that was obviously influential in this story. Yeah, are you familiar with the concept of eternal recurrence, Heather?
No, not, yeah. Oh.
I can't say it's ever fully grabbed me, but there is something there. That's where Nietzsche is saying that, you know, a demon says to you that what's going to happen to you is you will eternally live over this life again and again and again throughout all time. So you'll be just redoing the same sequence, which is a bit what happens in this novel. And, you know, Nietzsche's asking you the question that, you know, do you want a dull life or do you want an interesting life? Or, you know, if you have this really bad life and you're just living it over and over again, that would be really appalling. So you'd want to have the better life so you could live the better life over and over again. I can't say why this argument is so important, but there's obviously some importance there. Yeah, I'll give you a question. You know, you got Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler meets the demon, and the demon says to him, "Oh, here you are, starving to death in the gutter, trying to sell your postcard paintings to the tourists, and you nobody gives a damn about you, and you're just fading into the gutter. Or join me, and you can become this future dictator of Germany, and all the crowds are looking up to you." So which would you pick? You've got those two choices, either the Hitler that dies in the gutter or the Hitler that rises to the pinnacle of power.
I mean, if it was presented to me exactly that way, I'd be like, yeah, I want to be adored by the masses. However, if it was thrown in like you're going to kill 6 million people on the basis of some arbitrary shit, I hope I'd take a step back and be like, whoa, that's part of the deal. I'll just die in the gutter. Thanks. That's fine.
Oh, okay. You made your choice, die in the gutter.
Look, I'm the kind of person, this is my philosophy. You should be more willing to, if you believe in something, you should be more willing to die for it than to kill for it. Like, killing should be your last resort. I think if you really believe in something, like, that sacrifice is going to be on you, and you shouldn't be trying to make other people like sacrifice for it. That's me. So I hope that if somebody gave me that information and is like, you're going to be great, but you're going to achieve your greatness by killing a bunch of people, I'll be like, that's not great. That's fucked up. That's not greatness. That's not how I want to be remembered and, you know, make the history books. That's not worth it. That's horrible. I mean, I hope so, you know, but
I'll have a good time dying in the gutter then.
yeah, I mean, honestly, like, yeah, I would, yes, absolutely. I'm the kind of person who, when I think about fighting for a cause, you know, I think about things that put myself and my body in danger. When I think about people who are my heroes, I think about people. So like when I read March by John Lewis, like, graphic novel memoir about his time as a civil rights leader and leading up to the March on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, what I took away from that, and also Gandhi did things like this, of like, being nonviolent is not the same as being passive, and people had to be trained, and people had to make the choice that they knew they were going to be putting themselves in situations where they would be in physical danger. They could go to jail, they could lose their jobs, they could die, but they believed in it so much that they would take that violence on themselves as a way to show that that violence is excessive, that it's not necessary, and that it's not something to be afraid of, that there's a strength in just standing up for yourself. You know, I just, yeah, that's definitely me. And I'd be I'd be much more likely to stand in front of people with guns than to hold one and fire it at somebody myself. So hopefully, I think. Who knows? We're all human and we
Not
surprise
going to go
ourselves sometimes.
Simon and Garfunkel. It's better to be a hammer than a nail.
I mean, the nail's what holds things together. When the hammer is done, the nail is still working. The nail's still holding things together. The nail is the point. Literally. Haha. Pun intended.
Yeah, I probably one of the issues that people have their ideas of social good and evil. Obviously, if you operate within a social group, I don't know, a proverbial medieval village out in the wilderness somewhere or whatever, that obviously the moral values matter because they enable you to share space with other people. But on the cosmic scale, I wonder if any of our moral ideas really have any value. You know, can you put them up there as an absolute, you know, because I'm asking, who are these human beings anyway? And that's actually asked in the comic when the trolls are laughing at the humans and saying, well, more or less, who do you think you are?
I mean, if we lived our lives on a cosmic scale, then, I mean, and it's certainly fun to think about these things. That's why I'm part of this philosophy group and why I started off my college career as a philosophy major. Like, I love thinking about these big things. However, when we live our day-to-day lives, we're all like, we all act like we believe in a physical world that's real. And like, I always forget the word, not existentialist. Is that it? Where you believe like there is an actual objective world outside? That's not it. Anyway,
The philosophy is called realism.
No, there's a different, not epistemological. That's something else too. Anyway, it starts with an E. I always forget it for some reason. But we all live our life in this way. You can't really live it any other way. So yeah, I mean, on a cosmic scale, does it matter? I mean, who knows? I think physics is largely right. So I would say no, none of this matters. But on a day-to-day, and in terms of like, it matters to us as people. This is how we were evolved. This is how our societies work. And so in that sense, it does matter. And I don't think it's necessarily arbitrary or wrong to hold ourselves to standards that are intrinsic to ourselves and that don't have any kind of like objective or universal truth to them. I don't know. Maybe that's not the right way to think about it, but that's how I think about it, because when I think about how I live my day-to-day life, I'm thinking of it on a human scale. And when I think about theoretical stuff and I'm testing the limits of human knowledge, then yeah, I'm thinking on a cosmic scale. But those are two different things. Oh, God. Sorry, I've got to put here we go. I have the power. Except I don't. There it goes.
Oh, that was what was the name of that film? I Have the Power.
Don't remember.
Rufus Sewell was in it. Dark City. That's it.
Oh, Dark City. Yeah.
I thought that, you know, that'd probably be one of my top 10 science fiction movies, I think.
Pretty obscure, that one.
Obscure.
But it was good.
Yeah, I went and watched it at the, midnight screening. I think, I went and saw it twice. So, yeah, I was very impressed by that story.
I was that kid who's like, oh, these ideas are so old hat. I already believe the world is pointless and dark. I'm 12. I'm so mature. You know, the kid who goes into college as a philosophy major. I was that kid.
Well, that's one of the problems is that, we get the idea that our ideas, cosmic, that we can change the world, or, but what do we really know, It's like all the American nutcases I'm in contact with are in the gun lobby and believe in the red, white, and blue to the end of time, and it's like they're ready to go out and shoot to support their ideal of America. And I tell them, no, don't do that. Just take a very hard, strong look at the world around you. And maybe that sort of idea, it's like the idiots that ran into the Capitol building. Yeah, they're just simply making a huge error. They're not standing back far enough, no matter what their aims are, and seeing things in the greater context, What are you going to do? You're going to run into the Capitol building. Okay, you had a nice tour of the place. That's as bad as good as it gets, but they're not in the slightest way achieving anything positive in relation to their ideals. They just think, oh, yeah. They think that there's a lot, what's a whole of America going to suddenly rebel, raise Donald Trump on their shoulders and march along Washington and say, he's our king. This is, the level those guys are on. They're living in a fantasy world.
I mean, again, that's where I think that because it's always easier for us to take than it is to sacrifice. And so I think when you think about something you believe in, if you think about giving things up for it and you're still like, yeah, it's worth it, that really says something. Versus if you're willing to take, I mean, you might be willing to take and not believe in anything very strongly. Like being willing to take for something isn't a strong,
So what do you think of the people that work in charities and do the, what's the name of that 19th century guy who wrote books like David Copperfield and that? What was his name? It was
Dickens?
Dickens, yeah, where the charity is really a charity for the people running it. And the orphans are simply the meat in the sandwich. And that's very true today with a lot of supposedly charitable concerns.
Sure, but again, those are people who are much more willing to take than they are to sacrifice.
Exactly, but they're taking under a false pretense, which is even worse.
Yeah,
there's two types of bad. There's a bad that comes in your face and says, well, I'm bad and I know it. And there's a bad that pretends to be an angel. And I'm very, very down on the bad that pretends to be an angel.
I say get rid of all of it. Let's all be good.
You've been a bit optimistic there, aren't you?
Why not? If I shoot for everybody being bad, then everyone's going to be bad. If I shoot for everybody being good, then everybody could be good. I mean, I get it. I got a choice. So.
Oh, well, so you sort of been a rather strong-willed person in your life, have you, Heather?
I've had to learn to be, for sure.
Mm.
And ultimately, things come down to yourself, like your own responsibility. What are you going to do? What are you going to fight for? What are you going to hold people accountable for?
I'm standing back and looking at humanity and thinking, no.
Yeah, so you're a Billy Pilgrim.
Yeah, I'm thinking that I'm just going to look for the angle that, pleasures my nervous system in the right way. So I don't exactly too much believe in too much in the way of high ideals. But they are there. They are there. In fact, there is a belief in a certain type of high ideal, which trumps my persona.
Is there anything else in this graphic novel that we want to talk about for tonight? Oh my gosh, I'm farther than I read.
Well, David can fill us in on the quality of the artwork in it. What were some of the artistic examples that grabs you, David? I thought that it wasn't bad actually. There was some good artistic sequences in it. I think where he's got the overview of the city of Dresden and stuff like that.
Is anyone else? Oh, he left.
Yeah, I mean, I thought there was some experimentalism going on, and yeah, we mentioned the the storyboarding sequence. Yeah, there was, I mean, a good grasp of the format. Very effectively used, I thought. I really like this sequence where he's looking at the the Tremolfadorian book, which was just individual moments, and of course they were all incomprehensible. But I just like the abstract.
I think it really spoke to the strengths of graphic novels as well.
Yeah.
That there was no beginning, no end, no morals, all seen together in the same instant, just to enjoy like the pleasantness of life, to remind you of the pleasantness of life. I feel like it's just a moment where the artist is kind of has a chance to highlight the value of this particular project in its own way.
Sure. I mean, that's in a way that's kind of like what a comic is. It's just individual moments. Although even in a picture, there's still movement in a picture. There's still, time passing in the course of even one panel.
True indeed.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, nothing here is like a nude descending a staircase level of motion in a still, but I'm just kidding. Sorry, I just wanted to make a reference.
I'm a bit curious about that. There's an example. All right, page 125, where Billy holds out in his hand something that looks like a gem. I think it was supposed to be a diamond or something, and some false teeth uppers or something like that, and he's holding them out to this German guy. I'm trying to figure out what's the significance of all that.
Well, that isn't that the diamond that he used for his wife's wedding ring?
Yes. Yeah, that seemed to be the case. Yeah, he eventually presents it to his wife. So he's shown actually something quite valuable, a diamond, in the situation where he might get shot for it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't quite work out. So there's this German guy, sort of mocking him a bit. I take it you find more a very comical thing, yes? You expect us to laugh. You thought we would enjoy being mocked. Do you feel proud to represent America as you do? Earlier on he said, these are the men captured fresh from the front. These are the men America sends to kill us. These are fools. So I assume that this guy, he's got a suit on. Maybe he's probably got one of those little SWAT sticker badges on his lapel as well, but I don't see it. So he's somebody who works for the government. So this guy is there, a sort of a Nazi politician, perhaps. I don't know.
He looks just like an ordinary dude in the streets.
Don't be fooled by that. They're the worst Nazis. That's according to Hannah Arendt.
Sure.
The banality of evil.
I'm just saying he doesn't look like any particular kind of leader. Just a dude, like a middle-class dude, who feels resentful of this particular American because he's scrawny, I guess. But yeah, I mean, certainly you have, oh gosh, something so that talks to the fragility of humanity with the false teeth, and something that's valued highly and is, you know, kind of indestructible.
Now that was in Planet of the Apes as well, where Charlton Heston's going over the false teeth.
Yeah.
Ever seen Planet of the Apes? And where he's saying to Dr. Zaius, his man was a weak, fragile creature, but he was here before you and he was better than you, which is also Nietzschean, actually, because one of Nietzsche, I think Nietzsche's great points is, look at humanity compared to, say, a lion. Look how magnificent the lion is. Now look at the human body, how weak and fragile it is by comparison, and how perfect the lion is, there's another sequence here on page 131 where there's the old woman handing out the soup. There you are, finally, come on, get your soup. Aren't you awfully young to be in the army, I guess? And you, aren't you awfully old to be in the army? Yes, ma'am, I am. And what are you supposed to be, child? I don't know. Just trying to keep warm. All the real soldiers are dead, she finally says. It was true, so it goes.
All the real soldiers are dead. Yeah, very anti-Darwinian reading. That's how I read it. Very anti-Darwinian. All the real soldiers are dead. And it's the ones who are too old and too young and too scrawny and too cowardly. Those are the ones who are left. It's the ones who buy into the project the most, and they're most fit for that project are the ones that don't make it. Contrary to popular, tellings of war.
Well, if you get too involved, you eventually will burn up your reserves.
I'm trying to see, where did that diamond come from? Because that was a few pages ahead of where.
It was a diamond he'd kept, or was it, an heirloom or something he'd picked up. I don't know where it came from. But the image, of course, the false teeth becomes what the trells are. So you've got the diamond represents the eye, and I guess the false teeth represents the eyebrow.
I kept thinking of de Tocqueville as well as I was reading this, because de Tocqueville, in his early assessment of America, said, wow, we've got this program set up here with a civilian in charge of the military and citizens choosing that civilian in charge of the military, and citizens being part of the military, and citizens running the military in every aspect, and they're the purse and everything. He was like, no republic, no voting citizenry would ever choose to waste treasure and life and time and resources on a pointless war. I feel like we have many many times. And I just kind of kept thinking about that. Like,
Oh,
there's
yeah,
this,
yeah.
we still tell ourselves that war is something that happens and not something that we choose. And I don't know.
China's raring to go now. It's been on the war path for a number of years. I'm not saying they're completely unjustified. China too was using the smokescreen to embark on the final genocide of the Uyghurs and the Tibetans, which notably there's very little. I mean, we spoke 1945, you know, no more Holocaust.
Never again, except immediately right after and every few years ever since.
They're very willing to comment on the Holocaust, which it's safe to comment about. But when, say, you come to the Chinese Holocaust, no, we'll just look the other way. It's a little bit inconvenience, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there was Rwanda. There's obviously the Rohingya. Stuff's happening in oh, I can't remember the name of the country. Aung San Suu Kyi. I mean, like, yeah, you had the in the 90s. Oh God. Look, I had a big old glass of Cote de Rhone, so things are kind of leaving my brain at the moment. But yeah, we've had plenty of atrocities since then. Yeah. And we've been part of plenty of atrocities since then. Like, plenty.
Well, you're facing a China now, which, if it sees America as preoccupied, grab Taiwan while the going's good, which will lead to quite a severe conflict, most likely. But they'll figure, oh no, the Americans aren't going. They're too preoccupied. We can grab Taiwan. We're cool. If you have a president that doesn't stand up and say to China, you know, you try anything and you're dog meat, which is what Trump would have done. But you could say, tell me in every respect he was a bad guy, and I might even pay you a few points. But he was the sort was going to absolutely tell the other guys what they're going to get if they cross him.
And yet his greatest military accomplishment was randomly leaving a base, was it in Yemen, and then which was brand new, and then immediately taken over by the by Russia, and yeah, like
no, it's
super
the
great military
Yemenis. The
leading.
Yemenis are Shiites. There's a Shiite faction in Yemen.
Oh, it was the
Oh, you mean Syria?
Yeah, and what's the name of that group that's been helping us and is really oppressed? Anyway, just left them to get fucked over, and then we lost a base.
Oh, that was inevitable.
But China, it's hard to judge China because China is literally step by step just using the American playbook. So it's kind of like, it's not good when we do it. It's not good when you do it. But since we're doing it, it's really like the pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah, the Kurdish.
Kurds, that's it. Oh, the Kurds, the poor Kurds.
Well, the only problem that there's not a good outcome there. This is a problem. The Kurds are spread across several different countries at this borderline. So, you know, you got Kurds in Syria, you got Kurds in Turkey, you got Kurds in Iran, you got Kurds in Iraq, and you could create a nation out of them all, but it would be a landlocked nation, which would be a very difficult position to be in. And so, you know, if you create a nation there, you're probably just going to create trouble. So there was no way out. The alliance with the Kurds was always a temporary one, as long as there was an advantage in it. That's why they never allowed the Kurdistan to exist in the first place, because it would have been a landlocked nation. So we've got the optometrist equipment. I'm going downhill in my old age, I think. Yeah. So, you know, he's got the visionary equipment. So that's he's giving people glasses to see the world in different ways or more clearly. And then he's got his daughter after his wife. Now, his wife dying was an important sequence, you know, that she went completely out of her head when she heard that he was in hospital, you know, fractured to bits, and got in a car, drove along, hit the brakes. Her car got damaged, and she got carbon monoxide poisoning and died due to that. Makes it to the hospital where she intended to go, but is dead on arrival. And this is a thing that, here it's pointing out being so obsessed with where you're going and not really watching how you're getting there. And she hadn't noticed the danger, which only deepens the tragedy pointlessly. There was no point in rushing, getting in her car and rushing there anyway, or even it was probably a stupid thing for her to get in the car and think she could drive when she was in a panic state. Maybe she could have taken a taxi, probably had enough money for her to afford a taxi anyway. But see, she makes a very serious error. Now, this is one of the errors that could have been avoided.
Carbon monoxide doesn't exactly help your thinking process.
Well, that's the whole point, that, something is happening which is going to overcome her ability to see what's happening. And this is a thing that it's the story's pointing out. To avoid the bad, you're going to have to be a very astute observer. And this is the other aspect, is people often think, oh, if I'm in the same shoes, I would have done different. And this is what I doubt. Put in the same shoes, you'll end up making the same mistakes that the other person did. I don't have such a fond opinion of humanity as Stephen Pinker. I think humans are very prone to just relive the same errors again and again.
Well, yeah. But we can also learn from our errors. We do both. I was looking at page are we on? 99. And the Trapamodorians are telling Billy, he says, but you have a peaceful planet here. Today we do. On other days we have wars as horrible as any. There isn't anything we can do about them, so we simply don't look at them. We ignore them. We spend eternity looking at pleasant moments, like today at the zoo. Isn't this a nice moment? Yes. That's one thing Earthlings might learn to do if they tried hard enough. Ignore the awful times and concentrate on the good ones. Is this valuable?
That's the most important part of the story, yes.
Is this what the story's telling us, and do we think it's valuable?
Well, we're educated to think of life, as transforming the world, doing the goods, and that's particularly, you particularly see that in the left. It's like the coronavirus. We, the master technicians of the world, will save the world from coronavirus, whereas historically, vaccines for cold and flu viruses have existed since World War II, and they haven't succeeded really at stopping a virus. And I would say, no, even with COVID, they're not going to succeed in stopping it, but they're doing a tremendous amount of damage in pursuit of their greater glory, that, You know, you look at all these politicians, they're grandstanding. Oh, my coronavirus is better than your coronavirus story because I'm the smarter politician, when often it was just luck. And nothing else matters. Nothing. I realise, looking at the politicians in this, that nothing else matters to them in general other than their own grandstanding. There is no other reality to these politicians other than their own grandstanding.
It feels a bit like what you're saying is if we can't do it perfectly, there's no sense in trying to do it better because we're not going to completely stop coronavirus or the flu or any of this stuff, but we can limit the damage it does and try to do better and a little bit better and a little bit better each time. And we're not going to fix all of humanity's foibles, and we're never going to get to a place where we never make mistakes or we're perfect, but we can do better than we're doing now.
The crisis they're creating, this is going to be something that's going to come down the years. That if you find you're in, probably won't get quite as bad because they have a lot of more modern technology, but you end up in something like the Great Depression and you think to yourself, well, was it worth it?
Well, we got into the Great Depression because we stopped trying to do better. We put our heads in the sand. We pulled a Tralfamadore. We're just like, well, it's gonna happen, so just let it happen. And we stopped trying to do better. We relaxed the safeguards. And again, 2008, we did the same thing financially. And you know, some people won. In fact, now there are people. I mean, the stock market versus the job market are so out of whack because the stock market is not the economy, and we think of it as the economy, but it's not the economy. So the people who are already doing well are doing even better, and the people who are at the bottom are doing worse because those two economies are totally separate. But we just stopped trying to do better.
That's where I actually started to get turned off the left. It was the GFC when I saw them bailing out the what was it, the AIG, and that was a stunt. You realise all the other Wall Street banks had made that the bad bank. They'd all taken bets against it, and it was stuffed. And the American government thought, well, we'll have to bail out all these bad bets. And I thought, well, Obama's going to stop this. And Obama just sits down at the table with him and pushes all the cash across at him. And I was, went against my puritanical leanings, you might say. And I thought, is there going to be a price to pay for this? And I didn't really think about it. But then you had the Wall Street protests, and what grew out of it? Antifa. And now we're moralistically in a situation where the Western worlds, the Anglo-Saxon countries have become very socially divided. We've got a potential war with China. So, yeah, it's like World War II all over again, the same build-up. I used to wonder 40 years ago, actually, how did it come about? How did the build-up to those wars happen? And now I've seen it. I've seen what's involved. And it's just stupidity and egoism and grandstanding and people who cannot ever see beyond their self-interest.
Have we run out of things to say about this particular novel? Or a graphic novel or movie or any of it? The ideas presented here?
Oh, well, there was David left the Hagel meeting. What happened to you, David?
Actually, I went to sleep, but
Nice. Oh, I'm sorry I missed your movie thing. I had something come up at the last minute, which is rare in COVID times, but I did.
okay, that's fine, no problem.
I did kind of want to see that.
You missed the great moments in that meeting. That's where that's Daniel, remember Daniel? Was his name Daniel Sanderson? He
Yeah,
started looking at me and being quite nasty and saying, well, I've always wanted to meet a psychopath, you know. So what's it like being a psychopath? Because I like Donald Trump.
I'm sure that's not the first time you've ever gotten that one, Stephen.
No, never that deep before. And, you know, I'm thinking, well, you know, this is my trouble. I was a lefty, so I know both sides of the ropes. And I know what drives them. They all believe that, you know, the left parties are going to come along and give them, you know, an easy life and, you know, a universal basic income, and they can all sleep in. And that's their motive. That they will support. They would support Auschwitz if the outcome of it was they were going to get a good deal out of it. That's what I think of humanity.
Yeah, if we
And
thought
they
that way,
believe that.
then no. I mean, we got rid of freaking Al Franken, and yet no, the left isn't like that. The left is the common refrain is the left can snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory, right? We're just like so constantly like, we can do better. We can hold ourselves to the rules, even if they're not following the rules. It's like, it's the right thing to do, and it's the wrong thing to do. It's the best of times, and it's the worst of times.
Yeah.
Anywho, what's the next movie you're doing, or the next graphic novel? Well, I guess we need to finish this one.
I just right now made the announcement for next week. I was debating what to do, and I finally decided while we were talking. But tomorrow is Coonskin.
It's a movie I haven't seen, actually. So the heavy metal cartoon, which wasn't a Bakshi, was it? But it seemed to be very inspired, a little bit inspired by Bakshi's ideas. I quite loved, and of course Wizards, and I finally caught up with Fritz the Cat. But the others I haven't seen.
Not a fan of Bakshi. I'm gonna skip this big time.
Yeah, I mean, he's extremely well. He's the one he is, and he's
the Marmite of illustrators, I suppose.
The Marmite of pessimism.
Actually, there's a lot of different graphic novel groups happening, and I post them all on my group.
Okay, The Dreaming. Daniel, the Lord of Dreams, has abandoned his kingdom.
That might be a bad choice, but it's the one I went with. We'll see. I guess we'll see.
I don't really
I hope this one isn't pretentious.
It is. It is.
All writers are pretentious. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, I haven't read it, actually, so we'll see. But don't be surprised if it is. So, yeah, Heather, the one I'm talking about is this one. I have a comics, animation, and etc.
Okay.
That you may be interested in joining, and as you can see, there's lots of stuff going on.
Ooh, Swamp Thing.
Lots of stuff going on.
I read the biography of the lady who made the creature from the Black Lagoon costume. It was super fascinating. She was a kick-ass lady. Man, she was cool. And yeah, that costume is great. Good movie.
So what do you think of The Shape of Water?
It's fascinating. There's a lot of stuff in there that I'm like, I could do without. And certainly if you reverse like the genders, it gets real problematic. But I was weirdly attracted to that fish man, which is something that Guillermo del Toro wanted to have happen. He specifically was like, let's make this thing sexy, which I appreciate. Thank you, Guillermo. And I'm just like, I'm here for Guillermo del Toro, you know, super, super much. All for it. Pan's Labyrinth. So good.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. I would like to. get to that.
Pan's Labyrinth, yeah, great movie. Really,
Yeah,
really
also,
good
yeah.
movie.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. And then there's the sound design in it is something that just like gives me chills just to think about, because so there are sounds associated with each character, and there's like the creaking leather sound of the fascist, Spanish fascist, like stepdad guy, which is associated with like his leather belt and holster and stuff. And then it's also carried into one of the characters, and there's this like one moment where it like comes back, and it's so prominent to me because I was paying attention for reasons I don't really remember, but I was just like, wow, that's amazing. Oh, Guillermo del Toro, man. He was supposed to direct Lord of the Rings, I think, or one of the Lord of the Rings, and then backed out, or maybe The Hobbit or something like that. Missed opportunity.
Now, Matalia's going to sign off.
Yeah, sorry, I'm feeling a bit exhausted. But yeah.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I was glad to have you
Sleep.
here.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
you'll like The Dream.
Yeah.
Really, I'm expecting more of an aesthetic pleasure of the artwork more than the story, but maybe the story will surprise us all. But
What,
the artwork.
what era does The Dreaming come? Is it a recent
Remember
comic?
what I said a few weeks ago? We did so many months of doing all the great classics from decades past. I said a few weeks ago, from now on, we're going to stick to things that are recent being defined as things that came out in the last 3 years, because we should pay attention to what's relevant and current. So for the next for a while, it'll be the next things that have come out in the last 3 years. Like this one. This one came out in July.
Okay, what's the name of the author?
The Dreaming. Well, we read the first issue of Sandman, if you remember, like a couple of months ago.
Okay, so it's the same.
No. That was Neil Gaiman. But the point is that comic ran for 10 years, and it had a large story. And then when it was done, then there were a number of spin-offs. The Dreaming is one of the spin-offs. So this picks up a long time after the story that we read here a couple of months ago. And the story took a whole, there's a huge backstory now that basically you're picking up the story with a completely different TV show.
But this isn't
Gaiman,
is it? It's not Gaiman.
It's the same world with and continuum, but the author is named Simon Spurrier. I don't know anything about him, but utilizing concepts and scenarios and characters created by Gaiman, and there was a number of conversations that they had. So direction by Gaiman as well. Hope that was understandable.
I got it.
If you did read the full 10 years worth of the Sandman comic, the story took a large history, and by the end of it, spoiler warning, there was this changing of the guard, where the Sandman that we knew, and he's not called the Sandman, the Morpheus that we knew, the Dream Lord that we knew, retired, and now this is the new one, a new one, and the story picks up from there. I'm not sure how much of the background you actually will need for reading these 4 issues of The Dreaming. I'm gonna guess probably not much. Just take it on its own and assume, if anything is indecipherable, that there must be some context. But I'm expecting it to be more of an artistic, aesthetic experience more than a narrative experience. But it's been reviewed well. People have said it's a good read, and all right, we'll see. I was debating.
Okay, the volume 2's called Empty Shells, right? Volume 3, One Magic Moment.
As always, I'll send you the file. As I
A
always do.
magic moment. Sorry. I'm feeling that wine now. It's nice. I'm so relaxed.
Don't become an alcoholic like me.
Well, hopefully not. No, I mean, I haven't really.
Never once been drunk. Never once.
Really?
Never
No.
once. Not
I'm more of a social drinker, so I haven't been drinking very much lately. But tonight I was like, I feel like some wine. And I like a good Cote du Rhone.
So no cigarettes, no marijuana as well.
I've done that.
I've never done any of those things.
Have you ever been a smoker?
Mm-mm. Never had a cigarette. There have been times in my
I was asking
Oh,
David.
oh,
David when he says he's never had a drink.
No, smoking is totally out of fashion these days.
Okay, so you could join company with Donald Trump, who is a non-drinker.
it's true.
Yeah.
He's a teetotal. So he says.
Yeah.
It's a little hard to square with certain aspects of his behavior, but you know, whatever. I suppose there's other reasons. Every time I have
We'll
a
do
coat,
some more classics later on, but I just want to focus a little bit on contemporary things in the last 3 years, just for a while. But we'll get back to the classics sooner or
you
later.
said you've already done Fun Home, right?
We've already done Fun Home. We've done From Hell. We've done lots of cool stuff. We've done
Come to
Sandman.
the
We did the EC Comics War comics, which I probably would have never gotten to if not for this group. And I'm really glad I now have read those.
Yeah,
And, yeah, we did. What have we done? Sandman, only the first issue. And we did Swamp Thing a few weeks ago.
Swamp Thing. Gotta love those classic like B movie stuff, man.
It's too
Gotta
bad
love
you
it.
missed Masterpiece Comics, Heather. You would have liked that.
Yeah, I remember watching the movie with Elvira presenting it.
Elvira, man. Did anyone catch that really nice in the Slaughterhouse-Five, the really nice like visual allusion to The Day the Earth Stood Still? I really liked that. I wanted him to come out and say "Clock to Barato Nicto," whatever it is. I forget.
Yeah.
Oh, right. The Day the Earth Stood Still. So Heather, you were quite moved by that film, obviously.
I love that film. It's simple, it's classic, like makes you feel things, you know, and it's still even now kind of turns a lot of tropes on its head about, you know, alien visitors and things like that.
You know that it was about the dear Lord Jesus Christ.
There's what with the resurrection in there? What?
Yeah, you never noticed. Yeah, I remember when my parents first got a TV. I think I was knocked over, so I was spending a lot of time in bed after I was hit by a car when I tried to cross the road. So, yeah, I saw Earth versus the Flying Saucers back in 1966, and sometime around that time I saw, The Day the Earth Stood Still as well. You know, you're looking at this stuff, you know, over 50 years ago, and you go, wow, you know.
There's something to be said for things being done simply. And then, of course, I think it was like the first or the most iconic early use of the theremin for that like sci-fi sound, which is so much fun.
Forbidden Planet was all right, theremin. So they're using the theremin in Day the Earth Stood Still as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, Forbidden Planet, I've seen it. I think I've seen it more than once. Never remember it. It doesn't have the impact of The Day the Earth Stood Still, I think. And that's such an optimistic film as well.
Oh, Michael Rennie was ill the day the earth stood still, but he told us where we stand.
And Flash Gordon was there in silver underwear. Sorry.
Well, I suppose it's getting time to push off, I think.
All right, Stu. I'll see you.
Yeah, so
Tuesday.
catch you next time. Yeah, Tuesday.
Which would be Wednesday.
Oh, that's right. It'll be Wednesday for me.
Wednesday,
That's the what's his name, Mr. Smith,
Smith.
or Contra Can't I?
Worded out.
So he's just got to be like everybody else and go out for his can't bash. You're not one of the great ones until you've bashed can't. Okay.
Have you read the paper?
No, I haven't read it yet. No, I was catching. I just managed to finish the comic.
Okay.
So the papers.
I know there's so much to read. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how these young school students keep up with it all. Because I'm realizing now I'm playing the game of a student, and I'm really not doing all that much. And well, that's old age for you.
There's a few philosophers that, as a young woman philosopher, the first word out of somebody's mouth to get you to just shut the F up, it's always going to be Nietzsche, Heidegger, or Kant. Someone's just going to be like, well, Nietzsche said, well, Kant said, well, Heidegger said, and then oh, you're not allowed to talk right now because gender. It's annoying. So there's a few philosophers that I'm just like, I'm never reading you. I don't care. Don't want to hear what you have to say. Because if those people are using you to shut me up, then there's nothing you can say that I want to hear. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, I didn't love Freud until I read him. And then I'm like, oh, I really like Freud. He's a great writer. Not perfect, but has some interesting things to say.
Okay, see you later. Nice to meet you, Heather, and catch you another day, David.
Catch you later. All right.
All right. That turned interesting. Perhaps went on a bit too long. Man, I'm so starved for human contact, David.
Feel much the same, actually. Yeah. But, the reason I started this group was because I wanted to get to a lot of the books that I've never gotten to. And just this would be the motivation for me to read them finally. So, and also try to introduce people to some of the classics, some of them that I actually have read before. But
how did you get to start this group?
The what?
How did you get to start this group? You have to just bring it up to Richard, or how long have you been with the group? Or
yeah, well, Richard seems pretty accommodating. So does Jane. They're all doing. They've just let me do everything that I've been interested in posting so far, and all the things I do: the Monday morning Smith reading and the Monday night philosophy class that we do, although we're not doing it this Monday, and 2 movie nights, Wednesdays and Saturdays, and then this Friday night comic club. Yeah, they've been happy to just let me do it.
That's cool. Well, maybe I'll have to establish myself again and then start a whole Epic of Gilgamesh thing, because I think that'd be so much fun to explore with a bunch of smart people.
Oh, maybe, yeah. No, there's a number of literature groups going on. I think I mentioned that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Epic of Gilgamesh is interesting because it's literally text, because it takes place in but anyway, it's the text to everything. It's the foundation of religious texts and
right.
Just so much of Western civilization, but at the same time it's also an amalgamation of stuff that came before. This is so fascinating, and we're in this lucky, wonderful period of time where one of the least filled out tablets, actually we found a whole lot more, and it just like changes things. Like tablet 11, like who knew Humbaba was like his childhood